To set the stage for today's conversation, let's begin with a story that you are probably already familiar with. In September 2022, Yvonne Chouinard, who became famous for alpine climbs in Yosemite and then as a manufacturer of outdoor gear, said in a note, "We are making Earth our only shareholder." Yvonne, the founder of the outdoor brand Patagonia, relinquished his ownership of the business and directed its profits to fight climate change. Patagonia's brand promise is we are in business to save our home planet. An exciting extension of that brand promise is the creation of Patagonia Provisions, which is Patagonia's food and beverage division. The Patagonia Provisions division was created in 2012 by Yvonne Chouinard, and its first product was a salmon product that was only sold in retail stores in 2013. So from then to now, it's expanded significantly with now more than 30 products that are distributed through other great outdoor retailers and natural grocers. Our guest today is Jen Berliner, who is the head of marketing, sales, and e-commerce at Patagonia Provisions. You are in for an expansive conversation where we unpack the power of regenerative agriculture and dive into why one of the world's most innovative and loved brands like Patagonia is prioritizing it to the degree that they are. Are you ready? Let's dive in here. Well, welcome, Jen. We are so excited to have you with us today. And you are among fellow marketing nerds that are all leaning in and really curious about the inspiring career journey that you've had that's led you up to this assignment, if you will, at Patagonia Provisions. But first, I'd love to hear what is inspiring you most lately when you wake up in the morning, gets you out of bed, and makes you feel energized.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Bethany. I am excited by and energized about regenerative agriculture, which I'm sure we'll talk a lot about today because it's at the core of what we're doing here at Patagonia Provisions, but it really has the power to do so much to make our soil and the food that grows in that soil healthier. And so I'm really excited about growing crops and growing our food in a way that makes our planet better and our food more nutrient dense. And on a personal level, I'm energized when I wake up in the morning by my kids who are 4 and 2, who give me no choice but to be energized in the morning. But we really started cooking together. We make smoothies in the morning and they're getting interested in like, what's the green stuff we're putting in? What's this? What does this taste like? What color is it going to be when we blend it up? And so it's a fun thing that we're doing together and also, kind of a way to sneak a healthy foundation into their day. And then I get to drink it too.
Yes. And explain to them what you do. So it's kind of cool to bring them along in that journey. So as you reflect on your personal and your professional journey, what first sparked your passion for our planet? And then how has that passion evolved?
I think I've been interested in the planet, and really when I was littler, that just looked like interested in the nature around me for as long as I can remember. I grew up in central Pennsylvania in a kind of rural area. So I was just outside, like playing in the woods and streams and stuff my whole childhood. And it sounds simple, but I think that was just a big sort of part of my growing up. And then when I was in college, I learned about the concepts of behavioral economics and behavioral psychology. I know you said we're amongst marketing nerds, so we could probably do like a whole deep dive on that, but I won't go too far down that path right now. But I really became interested in how and why people make choices and how you can guide and influence those choices. So for me, that's a particular interest in understanding how people make choices around the environment and food and how we might be able to influence those choices to be healthier for us and healthier for our planet.
Incredible. Yes, we could do a whole episode on that too, because I am curious. But I want to dive in a little bit further into regenerative agriculture, because our audience of marketing leaders are from various industries, but we all have a role to play in our commitment to save our home planet. And so in your role as head of marketing and sales and e-commerce at Patagonia Provisions, you're focused on commercializing and scaling foods that help fight the environmental crisis. So you're also tasked with building consumer awareness and adoption of regenerative organic agriculture practices. So to level set, if you would, for this conversation, just could you give us a working definition of regenerative agriculture?
Yes, I know it can sound like a bit of a daunting or complicated term, but at its root, regenerative or organic certified, I like to think of it as sort of the gold standard for agriculture, or we might think about it as the next generation of organic. So many of us are familiar, at least, with organic food at a high level. We honestly might not all really understand exactly what it means or why it's good for us, but I think we're generally sort of aware that it's better. It maybe has less chemicals, and regenerative organic certified is really building on top of that. So it's thinking about the way we grow our food with three different pillars. The first is soil health and land management. The second is animal welfare. And the third is worker fairness. So the certification requires you to meet required criteria in sort of each of those pillars. But to dive in to the first one, when we think about soil health, this is one aspect that makes us so passionate about regenerative agriculture here at Patagonia, because in general, most human activity, like the things we do all day, are mostly making the environment worse. We're consuming things, we're buying things, we're putting things in plastic, we're driving in our cars. Most of what we do is not making the world better. But food, when it's grown the right way, actually has the power to make things better. If you grow crops in the right way, they can sequester carbon in the soil, which actually makes our topsoil healthier and the food that grows in that soil healthier, right? You can sort of conceptually think about if you're growing a carrot in a soil that has no nutritional value, there's not a lot of good stuff that's going to make its way into the carrot while it grows, right? But if you're growing a carrot in healthy soil that has a lot of nutrients and vitamins and minerals to give, those things are going to make their way into the plants that are growing there. And so you can actually sequester carbon and make better soil and better food through regenerative agriculture. And the way that that's done is through a number of practices. I think one thing that can be complicated about regenerative organic agriculture is it doesn't always look the same everywhere. There are nuances in different geographies and different crops and different climates. So you can't say this 8-point bullet list is the one way we always do regenerative agriculture. There is some nuance to it, but it might be things like not tilling. So not sort of tearing up the soil every year as you plant crops, or using cover crops, which would grow between rows of existing crops and help put nutrients back in the soil, or, grazing animals on farmland, which has a really important role to play. So it's really a lot of the way that people have farmed for many centuries, all the way back to indigenous people, like the way farming used to be. There's sort of a reason for that. And a lot of that is what comprises the sort of soil health and land management part of regenerative organic agriculture. And then, as I mentioned, there are also specifics around taking care of animals, which is also very important to sort of protect their welfare and their quality of life. And then the third pillar that I mentioned is something that really is often only in the shadows when we talk about farming, but it's really that sort of social fairness for the workers who are really doing all the literal heavy lifting and, really hard work to bring food to our tables and our grocery stores. So that's kind of the regenerative organic certification. It's administered by a third party called the Regenerative Organic Alliance, which was founded in 2017 by the Rodale Institute, who's kind of a longtime leader in advancing organic, as well as by Dr. Bronner. You might know them from soap or sort of household products that they make. And then Patagonia, our parent company on the apparel business. And these three groups came together with the idea of protecting the term regenerative, which even at that time and more today is quickly becoming subjected to a lot of greenwashing. So how do we really protect and keep the integrity of that term, and then reiterate the importance of regenerative and organic being put together? Because if you're using some of those regenerative agriculture practices, that's great. But if you're still spraying your crops with synthetic pesticides and fertilizers, and how is that's killing stuff in the soil? Those things are designed to kill weeds or bugs or different things. If you're spraying things that kill on the plants that we grow, our position and sort of our understanding of it is that's not a regenerative ecosystem that you're building. And so it's really important that we pair regenerative and organic together as we think about the future of our food system and the future of our planet.
There's a lot of education that goes along with marketing this type of a product, because you're having to explain in a lot of senses to some of your existing audiences and then bringing along new audiences what regenerative organic agriculture is, why it's important, and why, even on the products that I have here behind me, why it's advertised on packaging, what it is. And so I'd love to just hear if you could unpack for us a little bit about that challenge that sits in front of you to educate audiences while inspiring them to make a choice to buy, and how you've navigated that, what's been successful, and then what you're still working on when it comes to those two components side by side.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot that we're still working on. I won't suggest that we've cracked the code to any of this. I think we also are still candidly working through a first question that we get before what is regenerative agriculture, or why should I care about this, often is even Patagonia, like the coats and the vests and my ski stuff. Patagonia makes food. And so that's also, at a macro level, a story that we're working on telling. And, the answer that I would give there is, as I think in 2022, the founder of Patagonia, Yvon Chouinard, and the Chouinard family gave their ownership of Patagonia to what's called a purpose trust. And so all of the profits that Patagonia generates now, instead of paying a dividend to shareholders, it pays that money to organizations that are fighting the environmental crisis. And the sort of mission statement for Patagonia, as well as for Patagonia Provisions, is we're in business to save our home planet. Literally anything monetarily that comes out of our business goes to fighting the environmental crisis. And we also work to mitigate, any damage that we're doing by having all the ways that we are in business and making things have the least negative impact as possible. And so it might sound counterintuitive for an apparel company to be making food, but because of what you and I just spoke about, if food actually has the opportunity to be a positive lever to sequester carbon, to do all these good things. Our founder, Yvon Chouinard, will often say, when people ask me, why are we in food? The answer is really, how could we not be if we care about climate and we care about the environment? A little bit of a tangent, but just recognizing that there are many challenges that we're thinking about, including even just the brand name on our box. And it's a huge asset. I mean, Patagonia, the Axios Harris most respected brands in the country poll again showed Patagonia #1 trusted brand in America this year, and it crosses political lines and geographies and all that. So we're very lucky to have the 50-year legacy of this incredibly trusted brand that stands for quality and stands for its ideals, but we are still a relative newcomer in the food aisle and not a name that folks are expecting to see there. So that's just something that I'll point out as well. And then with regard to regenerative organic certified and sort of helping consumers understand and hopefully motivating them to care about that, it's another place where we've made a lot of progress and we still have a huge amount of progress to make. I think it will be a task. The organic movement took decades to come together. I think this will happen faster, but it's certainly not going to happen overnight. So some things that we think about or are sort of how to simplify the story, recognizing that we sell most of our products in grocery stores where people are cruising down the aisle, maybe with a kid, hollering in their cart. They just don't have a lot of time to be making decisions or reading long lists of attributes at that moment. And so we want our packaging to tell a very clear and simple story on the front, largely about nutrition and taste, since we know that those are the things that people focus on first. And then the back of each of our boxes has more of an essay that really sort of speaks strongly about the issues that we're passionate about, or, each one is different, but it may explain regenerative agriculture or explain why our wheat is grown differently. And so we don't expect people to read that off the bat. We hope that what's on the front of the box may bring you in because of your affinity for the Patagonia brand, because this looks like a high quality product that will, taste good and feed you and your family well. And then when you've got it at home and it's sitting on the kitchen counter, you've repurchased it for a second or third time, that we get a little bit more of your share of mind to dig in a little bit deeper with us on the box. And then the last thing I'll mention is, I think the real unlock that's still to come for regenerative organic agriculture is the story around nutrient density. And so really being able to actually prove what I was mentioning around food grown in healthier soil is healthier for us humans. And there are some companies doing really interesting work there. We at Patagonia work with one called Edacious that's doing nutrient density testing on milk and meat and grains that are produced using regenerative organic management practices, and the initial data is very encouraging. However, it's still early days. The legal risk, I would love to put some of this stuff on my packaging and be able to shout it from the rooftops, but it's going to, I think, be a multi-year process to really get to that point. But I think that will be the unlock, because consumers are very motivated, and as I am myself, about what is good for us and what we're putting in the bodies of ourselves and our families. And so when we can really make that link between things being grown better and tasting better and having more vitamins and nutrients, like that's really the ticket.
Well said. Really, really well said. And I've just enjoyed seeing the ways that there is a wider adoption and just growing awareness of regenerative practices. So on that note, as you consider the wider adoption and awareness of regenerative practices, what is something that you're observing that's causing you to feel hopeful and grateful? And then on the reverse, what remains a source of frustration? You maybe touched on that, but just specifically, I'd love to hear your answer on that angle.
I'm always hopeful when I get to talk to our farmers. They're doing such important, real, true, good work. I'll give a shout out to one of them. We work with a man named Luke Peterson. His farm is A-Frame Farms in Minnesota, and he grows this grain called kernza that we use in our pasta as well as our beer. It's this really cool, climate-friendly, perennial grain that has amazing properties. And he and his family are just like really doing the hard work. And when I get to talk to our farmers, or especially go to their farms and really see the biodiversity and like the richness happening when things are grown this way, it just makes me very grateful and hopeful. I think the frustrated flip side of that is like, it's really hard to be a farmer in America these days. They're not paid, what their crops are worth. A lot of farmers growing organic or regenerative organic, if there's not a consumer demand for it, they have to sell it on the commodity market and make pennies on the dollar. So I think the farming system is the place where I see a lot of bright spots and also have many frustrations.
Multifaceted, and to your point, it's a multi-year, even just in the context of Patagonia Provisions, there's a long play here that you have to be in it for the long game, and bring your audiences with you in that mission and that effort. Back to your career a bit and kind of what led you to this point and just some of your experience there. I'd love to talk about that and what was happening in your world before Patagonia. So you've led two high growth natural food startups, been part of that moment for them. And so when it comes to marketing for challenger brands, which at door number 3, we're an agency based in Austin that focuses on challenger brands specifically. And so that's where this question is coming from. But what do you find to be the secret to achieving your growth goals when you have to kind of outthink, when you can't outspend sometimes? And there's just that, like even in your context now, it's a startup within an existing brand with lots of equity, but you have to have that challenger spirit. So I'd love to know what you have found to be some of the secrets and those past experiences that you've carried in with you now.
Love to think like a challenger brand and very much still feel like one for sure at Patagonia Provisions. I think in the sort of high growth natural food startups that I've been fortunate to be a part of, I think a lot about the need that our product is solving. And I think it's also really important to have a clear understanding of where you sit in the category. Because often brands doing something from a challenger perspective, doing something interesting, may not fit neatly both into a consumer sort of understanding of this is a product I would use here, I would find this in this part of the grocery store. And that's something you have to get very clear on very quickly. And then there's also a tactical element when it comes to retail partners. If you're selling in grocery stores, again, if you've got a great product, but it doesn't fit with how Whole Foods is categorizing products in their set, or you got a refrigerated version of something that usually lives in the middle of the store, there's a lot of, and I've lived this, which is why this comes to mind, but a lot of very tactical things that you need to think about in terms of like, why are people looking for this product? Where are they looking for this product? Am I going to be able to deliver it to them sort of in a way that they expect? And then maybe a variation of that relates to some of my behavioral economics interests that I mentioned is really thinking about where consumers are now, and then where we want them to go. And the example that I would maybe give from my current time at Patagonia Provisions, but could point to many examples, is I'll take maybe our pasta that we just launched, the world's first regenerative organic certified pasta. When people are generally shopping for pasta, they're looking for good taste, some nutrition. Maybe they're looking for some whole grain to try to get that in for their family. Our pasta is 100% whole grain. It's got great flavor. And those are the things we talk about on the front of the box, because we want to meet our consumers where they are. They're looking for something healthy, that their kids aren't going to hate, that kind of fits within their budget, all of those things. Again, as I mentioned, the back of our boxes, maybe talk about why we use some kernza in this pasta, this incredible, climate-friendly grain that most of us are not yet familiar with. And so it's sort of bringing people in with where they are. When you're shopping for pasta, you're not necessarily thinking, this is my chance to sort of fight the climate crisis today, but it actually could be. But we know that that's not how most people are thinking right now. And so we want to absolutely deliver what they're looking for. It's imperative to give them taste and quality and nutritional benefit first, and then sort of work with them to build that relationship of where we want to go and the other things we want them to be thinking about when they're shopping our categories.
Interesting. So many complexities there. And I know that our audience relates to that. And whether you're leading a challenger brand that's like in the literal definition, or we often talk about embracing a challenger spirit within your entity, it might be a legacy brand that you are leading a marketing team within. But I know that our audience, relates to having to solve some of those complexities and meet that immediate felt need for the person walking down the aisle. But then you have, you're inviting them into this multi-year grand, very audacious mission that you're tackling. And so my son sits there and is now reading quite fluently for age 7, but he reads the back of the cereal bottle. He reads the box. He reads the back of the crackers. Like even these boxes that I've had, he's just been reading them. And so there's so much opportunity once you do get them to pick up your box when walking down the aisle, to educate and inspire and bring them along that journey, even just in a multifaceted way, but just the back of the box does so much. So, and then I would love to shift a bit to your own just personal leadership growth journey. And I'd love to end on a question that is really practical and inspiring, helpful to our audience, which is what's a tool or a book or a practice that you have found to be helpful lately in your own leadership growth journey?
Yeah, this is such a great question. I was reflecting on it. Maybe I'll give 2 answers. A practice that I've been really trying to put into place it's fairly simple, but I've been working to make sure that I spend even 5 or 10 minutes every morning just kind of journaling, thinking about my day, what's ahead, what's coming. I think it's so easy as leaders and business people and parents to just sort of have the onslaught of the day coming at you. So even taking a few minutes to think about, what am I grateful for? What do I, want to release today? What are my objectives? Is one practice that I'm working on cultivating. A more tactical or sort of specific resource that I've been enjoying is maybe more on the fun side, but I've been doing a lot of reading on Substack, and there's a particular Substack that I love called Feed Me, which is written by a woman named Emily Sundberg, who writes a lot about sort of food and culture generally, but it's a daily Substack newsletter writing about culture through the lens of business. So covering a lot of sort of macro trends, startup world. And I find that she writes about things that are very aligned with my interests, but aren't things that might sort of cross the sources that I'm otherwise looking at day to day. And so it usually brings me inspiration to see how she's writing about some, marketing campaign that just launched on Instagram, or, an influencer strategy that this brand is doing, or this restaurant in New York is, cultivating hype in this way. And it's sort of very much within my interest, but adjacent enough that it always brings me something new. So I highly recommend that folks check out the Feed Me newsletter on Substack.
How neat. Yeah, I've just jotted that down. That's really great. So many great creators using even that platform to get the word out. And I love hearing about a new one. So thank you. Just a big, huge thank you from Princess, my co-host, who is usually in another square right across from me, but honored that you would spend your time with us this morning, and loving these themes that have emerged just with messaging and innovation. and how to market a brand that's far out front, like Patagonia Provisions. And then just that always educating posture you have to have, where we're accepting the onus of education as a challenger brand leading the way. And then extending a brand. So pushing the boundaries of your origin category. So interesting. And then the fourth theme that is amazing to hear your perspective on is just simplifying the complex. So making something that's kind of heady, easy, and quick to understand so that people can care. So thank you again, Jen. And I'm just cheering you on in this incredible mission that you've dedicated your time and energy to in this chapter of your career. So keep it up.
Thank you, Bethany. It was great to talk today. Thank you for having me.